Traders, how are you? With Marcello. Today, we're doing the recap of what happened in the markets last week. So, the market, stocks, absolutely everything so you can learn how to get that drip during that crisis that's coming. This week, we have the whole Twitter Elon Musk fiasco. We got Argentina in the World Cup. And we even have new technology where they're birthing people in pods just like the Matrix. Not weird at all. Biggest news of the week was the central bank in the US. They decided to raise the rates by another basis points or 0.50%. Now the range is in between 4.25 to 4.50. If I'm not mistaken, don't quote me on this. I believe this is the highest that we've been in about 7 or 8 years, if I'm not mistaken. Might be since 2008 and 2009, but the point is it's a really long time. And this is really big because now that we've had the inflation numbers come in as well, there's a situation that they might not raise as aggressively as they were planning on before. And this is really, really big because if you guys don't know, the interest rates essentially is what dictates what happens in our economy. The problem is that, before, you might be too young to remember, for example, the 2008 and 2009 crisis, but the economy right now, because of the 2008 and 2009 crash, is very over financialized. What that means is that because they lowered the rates to the lowest in historic history, literally the history of the world, the rates were that low for just a long time, right? Since 2008, 2009, that literally created a bubble, a huge, just the mother of all bubbles. And so everybody is literally leveraged to the bit, up to here, the giggy, because things were just easy to get. Money was cheap, right? So you could buy much more houses, you can buy more stocks, you can buy absolutely everything. So now that they're starting to raise the rates, that's putting a chokehold on that economy, because now, for example, the same house that would have costed you, let's say $2,000 a month, now costs $4,000 or $5,000 a month. So now things aren't moving as fast anymore, right? So that's why markets plunged on Thursday. That's why markets in the US were mostly negative this week, including Canada, which was down over 3%. Overseas market news, the European Central Bank also decided to raise rates, so they're negative as well, outside of Istanbul, which went up over 4%. And Latin America, mostly mixed, with Brazil, the Bovespa, going down over 4%. And then in Africa and the Middle East, they're mostly mixed, with the far east, Asia and Australia being mostly negative as well. A lot of news in the Bitcoin space. It seems like the contagion from FTX is starting to rapture the largest exchange in the world, which is Binance. The main auditor of Binance decided to not be their auditor anymore. They literally pulled out, probably because they're starting to see what kind of things are under the rug, if you know what I mean. And not only Bitcoin, but 2 other exchanges as well. If your money is on the exchange, I recommend you take it out immediately, put it on a hard wallet. This is what a hard wallet looks like. Well, not this one. Sorry, that's the magnet. It's this one. All right, this is a Trezor, Trezor, and then just YouTube a clip about how to get your money out. They failed their audit. And one of the things that was really interesting is that they listed all of their assets, but they didn't list any of their liabilities, for example, on CNBC. And they had their worst withdrawals in one day this week. There was $5 billion pulled out, and they even temporarily paused USDC withdrawals because of quote unquote token swap. That's always how it happens, right? Oh, there was a glitch in the software. Let's just pause them for a moment. And this is what I always warned you guys about, because I think the idea behind Bitcoin is solid, right? The decentralized, bring power back to the people, not controlled by these maniacs in the government. But I don't think they're going to let go of power that easily. And I always told you guys that I always viewed the future of Bitcoin not as Bitcoin being money, but the blockchain, which is the technology that crypto uses. And that obviously was the government coin, which is the CBDCs, the central bank digital currencies, which I very affectionately called government coins. So U.S. prosecutors now are looking to charge Binance and executives on a possible money laundering violations. But remember, they can't be regulated. It's decentralized. It can't be regulated. Canadian Security Administrators, which is the financial regulator in Canada, said that they are going to put limits on the amount of margin and leverage trading, including a ban. And this is, I quote, platforms located outside of Canada, which are accessible by Canadians, are regarded as operating in Canada. So this is going to cause a really bad problem where the last unregulated market in the world is now going to be probably over-regulated because of this fiasco with FTX. Speaking of FTX, the biggest a-hole in the world, Sam Bankman-Fried, which is the founder and former CEO of FTX, has been arrested in the Bahamas. U.S. filed criminal charges and requested his extradition. They probably did that now because they didn't want him to squeal about all the money they gave to these politicians. All kinds of fraud, wire fraud, money laundering, all kinds of stuff. And it was once worth $32 billion. And he's also facing charges from the SEC for violations of securities laws. Swedish central bank, the Riksbank, is saying that they're working on an e-krona, so another government coin as well. And they are using that to issue digital supplement to cash, which they'll eventually only issue because they don't want cash because they can't track you that way. And the digital yuan is supposedly going to come with an expiration date. So spend it or lose it. And remember what the World Economic Forum wants for us in 2030. They want you to own nothing, but you're going to be happy. So now they're going to issue you money that literally is going to expire. So if you don't go out and spend it, you lose it. And why is that? Because remember that consumer spending is literally the vast majority of the world economy. In any advanced economy around the world, consumer spending is over 50%. In the US, it's almost 70%. And this is the reason why we've had those interest rates, this bubble that I told you guys about in the beginning, for so long, because when they reduce the income, when they reduce the interest rates, then it's much easier to go out and consume. You can get out a credit card. It's cheaper to put something on a payment plan. It's cheaper to buy a house. It's cheaper to buy a car because the interest rate is lower. Right? So that's why we're in the mother of all bubbles. And now what's probably going to happen is, and here's my conspiracy of the video, of the conspiracy of the week. They want to be able to do this not only to track you, but also to be able to control you. Hey, we need you to spend that money by Friday. Otherwise, you're going to lose it. So go and spend it. Microsoft is blocking crypto mining on its cloud services. But remember, it's decentralized. It can't be controlled. Remember. And even Bitcoin suffered its worst liquidation in a month. Long traders lost $80 billion in 24 hours this week. The worst in 3 months was during the FTX bankruptcy, which was a $550 million loss. Overall for the week, Bitcoin down 2.19% to 17,123. For the year, it is down 64%, and year over year, it's down over 64%. In commodities, this isn't really in commodities, but I figured I'd put it here. Australia's peak actuarial body is asking the government to urgently investigate the country's incredibly high 13% excess death rate in 2022. Not 2020, when the pandemic started. This year, 2022. I wonder what could have happened. We won't say it so we won't get banned. Americans now are paying 40% more for vegetables. If you guys didn't know, especially my America back-to-back World War champs. I saw that on a t-shirt. It's a great saying. But if you didn't know, Arizona produces 90% of the leafy greens, and it is now suffering the worst drought in 1,200 years. California as well. And we've even had the situation with Florida where they had the hurricane, so that knocked out a lot of vegetation and vegetable growing as well. Colorado, amazing mile-high city of Denver, but the state of Colorado is going to begin feeding recycled sewer sludge back through people's drinking taps. Yummy. You're going to be able to own nothing and be happy and drink your own poo water too. Isn't that great? That deserves a button again, right? And declining US CPI, which is the Consumer Purchasing Index, makes traders a lot more optimistic about the Federal Reserve's ease of pace and the interest rate hike. So remember, if they stop raising the interest rates as fast, that's a good thing for the economy, because then they might even bring them back down, and then we can go back to buying things that are cheap again. China's ambassador also said that they're going to reduce the pandemic restrictions. So second largest economy in the world, one of the biggest consuming countries in the world as well. That's going to bring up a lot of demand. That's part of the reason why crude went up quite a bit. U.S. crude went up 4.60% to 74.29, with Brent up over 3% to 79.04. And Goldman Sachs, which is the most important financial institution in the United States by far, and one of the most important in the world, is saying that commodities will be the best performing asset class once again in 2023, handing investors returns of over 40%. This is because of the raw materials from oil, natural gas, and metals are going to boost prices because of the scarcities. And remember what I've been telling you guys about silver for a long time, right? I was a little bit early, but I think it's going to come soon. Gold went down 0.27% to $17.94 on the drop of the dollar, and silver went down over 1% to $23.31. Financial and banking news coming soon to every country in the world. There are withdrawal restrictions in Lebanon leading to armed bank raids on customers' attempts to get their own money out of the banks. Probably not a bad idea to buy some gold and silver, dig it up somewhere. Retirees also are going to get the largest Social Security payment interest increase in decades. It's going to be 8.7%. So those that receive the Social Security payments are going to get that raise. That's the highest in I believe 30 or 40 years, thanks to the Biden inflation. In 2022, providing the U.S. inflation at the highest rate in 4 decades was in June at 9.1%. We since have gone down by quite a bit, 7.1%. That's what they reported this week, which was below the actual expectations. So that, again, goes back to the interest rates and how the economy moves. The India CPI went down as well to 5.88%. The CPI in Germany went to 10% year over year. I'm sorry if you guys can hear the dogs barking. UK inflation went up to 10.7% in November, and October was a 41-year high in the UK at 11.1%, and the British pound and the euro hit a 6-month high against the USD, part of the reason why that gold and silver went down quite a bit. And the US Treasury Department said that the government spending in November for the US had a $249 billion deficit, meaning that we spent $249 billion more than what they received in our taxes. In October, it was $88 billion, and a year ago it was $191.34 billion. And they literally just passed another $1 trillion, both the Democrats and the Republicans. So this is going to be a big problem, and I hope you're preparing for it, because soon things are going to get heavy. Because remember, the preppers were right. The central bank in Peru said that they are not going to be growing as fast as before. I know most of you guys aren't in tune with what's happening overseas, but the government, or the president, I should say, in Peru tried to literally dissolve Congress. So they didn't pay attention to him, and they detained him, and they brought him away. And now there's these riots and manifestations and all kinds of stuff in Peru. It's a bit of chaos. There's a lot of tourists that are stuck too, because they put in a toque queda, which in English is a curfew. So you can't literally travel from state to state for 30 days. So a lot of people are stranded now. Argentina's annual inflation is at 92.4% compared to a year ago, which is the highest rate in 30 years. That's probably where we're heading to eventually. And in political news, I don't think I mentioned this last year, but Christina Kirchner, which was the previous president and now the vice president, has been jailed for 6 years because of corruption. And what every other socialist in the world does is rob money from the state. Economic news, U.S. retail sales are weaker than expected in November, pointing to a sluggish start to the holiday shopping season. Again, very bad news, because remember that 70% of the economy in the United States is consumer spending. So if the consumer spending is less, retail sales, people going out to the stores and buying stuff, than expected, we're probably in for a rough holiday season. A survey from Pew found that for the first time since the Great Depression, the majority of Americans aged 18 to 29 are living with their parents. And in corporate news, Microsoft struck a deal to buy 4% of the London Stock Exchange Group. They're going to help them update their systems and put all their financial data and trading platforms on the cloud. Adobe reported $1.2 billion in net income for Q4, so their shares went up on that news. And Ford Motor Company fell 7% after they introduced another increase of the Ford F-150 Lightning, which is the electric version. They're trying to say that they're balancing the rising cost of raw materials in addition to trying to not price the customers out of the market. But I think it's because the government launched launched an incentive. And as soon as the country launched that incentive that you get money back for buying an electric car for, it said, guess what? We're just going to raise the price. So we get the same amount of money, but you think you're paying less, but actually you're not. See how it works? That's why the government is no good. Free market is best. Turbulent year for global monetary tightening, recession fears, and the war in Ukraine. But there is good news. There's a mining stock out of Indonesia that's gone up 1,500%, almost 1,600%. Best performing stock of the year so far. More than 2 times the returns of Turkish Airlines. Technology, it's been confirmed on Tuesday that they've been creating more energy from nuclear fusion reactions than when they first started the process. This could lead to an endless supply of relatively cheap carbon-free energy. I believe that we've always had this energy for a long time. They just haven't let it go yet. Tuesday, Apple announced that their safety service, the Emergency SOS, which works via satellite, is going to be launched in France, Germany, Ireland, and the UK. Basically, if you don't have cell service, you can get a hold of emergency personnel like 911 and firemen with satellite access instead of the cell phone access. And a new tool developed by European and Australian scientists and using one of Europe's most powerful supercomputers. They're saying that there's going to be a unparalleled amount of extinctions over the next few years. 10% of animals and plants are going to die by 2050, while 27% by 2100. And this is really freaky. Birthing pods. Scientists unveil creepy concept video of human farms with hundreds of transparent artificial rooms to allow to grow a baby literally in a pod, kind of like the Matrix. I don't know if you guys remember, they had those pods where the machines supposedly were having the energy of the people inside the pod, and then they were freed if they wanted to be. But just remember, you're going to have nothing and be happy. So you're not even going to be able to make a baby. They'll make it in a pod for you if you're allowed to do that. If your money doesn't expire before, you know what I mean? Investment news, the worst year for initial public offerings in the US since 1990. If you guys don't know what an IPO is, it's when a company first goes public. 74 firms have raised $8 billion so far this year in 2022. 95% less than last year, 50% lower than any year than the last 31 years. And that includes the crisis in 2008 and 2009. And restrictions in Hong Kong, travelers visiting bars and dining restaurants are going to be scrapped effective on Wednesday. So glad that I traveled around the world before and I don't have to deal with any of this stuff. Still in Colombia, living the dream. Japan on Friday unveiled the biggest military buildup since World War II with a $320 billion plan in international events. They are rearming, especially because of China. It's going to make them the 3rd largest military spender after the US and China. And an unusual fact this week, an enormous aquarium in Berlin bursted on Friday carrying 1 million liters of water. That's over 264,000 gallons. 1,500 exotic fish died, and if it would have happened 1 hour later, there would have been human casualties as well. A toddler in Uganda has fully recovered after being swallowed and thrown up by a hippopotamus. While they were just, there at their house, the hippopotamus ate the child, and then they got scared and it threw up the child because people started throwing rocks at the hippopotamus. Can you imagine? And 2022 World Cup, France faces off against Argentina in the final match on Sunday. 1.5 billion people are expected to watch, except Americans, because obviously you guys don't watch football, the real football. And that's 20% of all humans living on Earth. That's the news for this week, guys. Let me know if you guys have any questions, and don't forget, the preppers were right.